Welcome to the world of Sweet Pea machine embroidery. Stay tuned to learn how to make this stunning butterfly wing clutch. This project combines beautiful fabric applique, intricate stitching, and practical design for a truly eye-catching accessory. Welcome back to another Keeping It Simple Sew Along with Sweet Pea. Today I'm kicking things off by guiding you through creating the butterfly wing flap for our stunning butterfly wing clutch project. We'll break it down step by step and have a blast bringing this beautiful butterfly to life. So grab your materials and let's dive in. First things first, we're going to hoop up a few layers of Sweet Pea Essentials Wet Away Stabilizer. This stuff is awesome because it will dissolve away later, leaving your work nice and clean. Once your hoop is ready, go ahead and stitch the place and line for the batting. Now grab your batting one, and if you'd like, an optional cutaway or bag stiffener to pop underneath it for extra structure. Lay them on top of the hoop covering the place and line and stitch them down securely. Then carefully remove the hoop from your machine, and we're going to trim the batting and any optional cutaway or stiffener about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching. Take your time here. Neat trimming makes all the difference. Next, let's stitch down the place and lines for the background. These lines are going to guide you where your fabrics will sit. Grab fabric A1 for the top section and fabric A2 for the bottom, and place them right side up over those placement lines and stitch them down. Then remove the hoop again and trim the fabric about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching in the center. Don't trim the excess fabric in the seams just yet. We'll need that later. Now comes the fun part. Let's embroider the quilting to give it that beautiful texture, followed by the antenna to start bringing our butterfly to life. From here, we'll repeat the applique process for the wing pieces. Now let's work on wing piece 2 with fabric C and optional Sweet Pea Mylar for a beautiful shimmer. Place fabric C right side up over the placement line, then cut a piece of Sweet Pea's lightweight iridescent mylar to the same size as your fabric C. Also lay the mylar on top. Keeping it flat, stitch both layers down together using the placement line. Remove the hoop and trim both fabric C and the mylar 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching. Take it slow as mylar can be slippery. Then embroider the stipple quilting to add texture and make that sparkle shine. Keep going with wing pieces 3, 4, and 5 using fabrics D, E, and F. And feel free to add mylar for that extra sparkle if you'd like. After each piece, trim neatly and then we'll embroider some details between pieces 1 and 5, 1 and 2, 4 and 5, and 2 and 3. These little touches really make the wings pop. After that, add the satin stitch. Then add the triple stitch detail along the top and bottom wings for that extra bit of flair. Let's tackle the circle part on the top wing. And then embroider the satin stitch along the circle to finish it off. Next, we'll embroider the spots on the wings. Follow the step numbers in your instruction file to get these in the right order. After that, add the satin stitch and detail along the middle of the wings for a polished look. Time for the butterfly's body now. Using fabric G, repeat the applique process, then embroider the two sets of stripes and finish with a satin stitch around the body to make it stand out. For the next step, we're going to add the lining. And here's a little tip. We recommend using a piece of fabric for lining one that matches the color of the satin stitch you plan to use around the butterfly. It's totally optional, but it helps the thread and bobbin blend seamlessly with the lining so nothing stands out too much. For example, if you use a bright pink lining with navy thread, it might pop out more than you want. Check out the photos here to see what I mean. A black lining with black thread gives it a much cleaner look. Now let's add some stability to the flap by grabbing a piece of cutaway stabilizer. Spray one side with adhesive, then place lining one right side up on top of the cutaway to stick them together temporarily. Trust me, this step is worth it. It'll give your flap that extra support. Now, remove the hoop from the machine so the wrong side is facing up. Place lining one right side up on top of the wrong side of the hoop, covering all the stitching, and tape it down. Then stitch it with a single stitch. This will leave the right side section open along the top raw edge. Remove the hoop and trim the fabric about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching on both the front and back, but leave about an inch on the right side, the body side, for some seam allowance. Now let's embroider the satin stitch along the background and wings. Here's a pro tip. Use the same color for your bobbin thread as your upper thread for a seamless finish. Finally, trim any excess stabilizer and trim the open seam of the butterfly back to about half an inch. Wash away the soluble stabilizer and then leave your flap to dry out completely. And that's it. You've just created a stunning butterfly wing flap. Doesn't it look amazing? Stay tuned for the next part of our sew-along tutorial where I show you how to complete the clutch. Alright, let's move on to attaching the clasp to our butterfly wing flap. It's an important step to make sure our clutch functions perfectly. To find the ideal spot for the clasp, start by locating the center of the top stitching line on the front of your butterfly flap. Grab a ruler and measure 3 inches or about 8 centimeters down from that center point along the top edge. Mark this spot with a pin and gently push it through all the fabric layers. Now flip your flap over. You'll see the pin poking through the other side. That's exactly where your clasp will go. When attaching the clasp, make sure it only goes through the flap lining, lining 1, and the attach cutaway if you use one. You don't want it piercing through all the layers of your flap, or you'll see the clasp from the front, and we don't want that. Just a heads up, this step needs to be done before we attach the flap to the main clutch body. Also, keep in mind that different clasps might have different attachment methods. The opening between the satin stitching on the back of the flap is a bit narrow, so not all clasps will fit it easily. We used our go-to magnetic clasp and had no issues, but you could also offer a hand-sewn clasp or even a cam snap if that's more your style. Once you're done, set the flap aside for now. We'll come back to it very soon. Now let's dive into creating the body of our butterfly wing clutch. We're going to build it step by step, and I'll walk you through every detail to make sure it comes together beautifully. Let's get started. First, hoop up a few layers of Sweet Pea tearaway stabilizer in your embroidery hoop. This will give us a solid base to work with. Stitch the place and line for the batting, then place batting 2 on top of the hoop, covering that line. Stitch it down securely. Remove the hoop from your machine and trim the batting about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching for a nice clean edge. Next, stitch the place and line for fabric A and lining 2. Start by placing fabric A on top of the hoop wrong side up with about half an inch crossing over the place and line and the excess fabric extending toward the right side of the hoop. Tape it in place so it doesn't shift, then stitch it down. Remove the hoop from your machine and flip it over so the wrong side of the hoop is facing up. Now place lining 2 on the wrong side of the hoop, also wrong side up, using the same place and line as a guide. And again, with about half an inch crossing over the line and the excess toward the side of the hoop, tape it down securely and stitch it in place. Now fold over fabric A, then fold and pin any excess lining 2 fabric to the stabilizer on the right hand side of the hoop. Once secured, stitch down fabric A, pulling it snugly against the stitching line. This is important to ensure the little pouch works correctly. Now flip the hoop over and remove any tape from lining 2. Then flip the hoop back over and continue. With that set, let's add some decorative touches. Embroider the red work butterfly design, followed by the circle quilting to give the clutch body some texture and charm. Time to add the clasp to the clutch body. First, stitch the placement cross for the clasp. This will mark exactly where it needs to go. Using a chalk pen or fabric marker, mark a small hole on either side of the placement cross where the prongs will go. Carefully insert the metal clasp prongs through these holes. Then flip the hoop over and place the metal backing over the prongs and gently push the prongs closed to secure the clasp. Now let's bring it all together. Remove any tape on the back of the hoop. Fold over lining 2 and tape it down securely, making sure to pull it tight against the stitching line. Tape it in place, then flip your hoop back over and stitch it down. Next, stitch the place and line for the flap. Grab the flap you set aside earlier and place it right side up on the clutch body, with the raw edge pointing towards the right side of the hoop. Position it so the outer border stitching on the flap sits just slightly above the placement line. This way, it'll get hidden in the seam. Double check that the clasp on the flap lines up with the clasp on the clutch body, or sits just a couple of millimeters below it. Also, make sure the tips of the butterfly wings don't cross into the seam allowances. Once everything is aligned, stitch the flap down and remove any tape where the flap was stitched. Now, let's add some loops for a strap. Stitch the place and lines for the loops. Then place your loops on top centered on those lines with the raw edges pointing towards the outside of the hoop. Tape them in place and stitch them down securely. For the back of the clutch, place fabric bead wrong side up on the hoop, making sure it covers all your embroidery and crosses over the raw ends of the flap. Stitch everything down. You can slow your machine down and raise the embroidery foot if it helps with control. If you use batting, trim it back about 1 to 2 millimeters from the stitching for a clean finish. Remove the hoop from your machine and flip it over so the wrong side of the hoop is facing up. Place lining 3 wrong side up on top of the wrong side of the hoop, ensuring it completely covers all the stitching. Secure it with sticky tape so it doesn't slip when you flip the hoop back over. Turn the hoop right side up, pop it back into your machine, and stitch the single stitch outline of the clutch. This will leave an opening for turning. Then stitch the triple outline to reinforce the seam. Don't worry about the next step in the file. It's just there to keep the machine foot from moving into the center of the hoop, so you can simply remove the hoop from the machine. We're in the home stretch now, folks. Remove the clutch from the hoop and take off any tape. And remove as much excess tearaway or washaway stabilizer as you can. Trim the seams to about 1/4 inch, leaving about 1.5 inches at the opening, and clip the corners to make turning easier. Now turn the bag right side out through the opening you left in the stitching. It might take a bit of patience, so don't rush. Use chopsticks or a turning tool to push out the corners for a crisp finish. Before turning the clutch again, fold in the excess fabric and iron it flat for a straight edge. Hand stitch or glue the opening closed at the bottom. Tear away any remaining stabilizer, including across the top of the clutch. It might look closed, but you'll see it's not. If you use washaway stabilizer, dissolve it now. Finally, turn the bag again through the pocket opening using chopsticks to push out the corners. Trim any loose threads, iron the bag flat, and if you use D-rings for your loops, attach a strap. And there you have it. Your stunning butterfly wing clutch is complete. Doesn't it look amazing, folks? Enjoy showing it off and happy stitching.